Good morning. My name is Matt Cameron, and I'm from the Salesforce Marketing Cloud Developers Group. Today, we're making a Salesforce Marketing Cloud app. We've got a big heap of people that are presenting. It's a bit rude to call them a heap of people, but there's a whole lot of people on this call that are presenting both via pre-recorded videos and also in the presentation itself. As we work through, I'll let everyone just introduce themselves as we get to them. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so the Salesforce Marketing Cloud Developers Group, it's been around for a while. Together with Elliot, Lakshmi, and Jared, community group leaders. The group's been running since 2014. And the purpose of the group is it's a developer group, and it's about helping people learn, share, and mentor Salesforce Marketing Cloud. You can find us on Trial on the community groups, and you can also find us on LinkedIn and YouTube and other places like that. Just go back. Whilst we're running through this, you'll see a QR code here. Please scan the QR code in, and I'll just run through what the purpose of that is. We've got a little app survey, which you can get involved in. We'll share this at the end in the wrap-up. Any responses we've had, and we'll also put together a bit of an infographic about this to be shared with the community. But it's just a survey, 3 questions. What are your favorite apps? One there already, Query Studio. Suggest and vote for things that you'd like an app to do. So we've got a suggestion there. Either make a suggestion or vote for an idea. And are you thinking about building an app? And somebody is. They said yes. So I think the options there are yes, no, and maybe. So we'll share that afterwards. So let's kick off. We've got 2 pre-recorded, and then we've got some presentations from the people that are on the call presenting. So the first presentation we've got is Pato, and he's going to talk about MC snippets, his motivation for putting that together. In the chat, please let me know if you can hear this. Just to make sure that this is working through the browser. No sound. Great. Let's see if I can rectify that quickly. I might have to share the tab for that. Just give me a moment. I'll do that. Once again, please make a comment whether you can hear or not hear, and we'll give it a run. We'll run through what Pablo had to say again.
Hey everyone, my name is Pato Sapir. I'm a Salesforce MVP and Marketing Cloud champion. I've been working with extending and creating apps for Salesforce Marketing Cloud since about 2012. And I recently created an app called MC Snippets. MC Snippets allows you to experiment and create and share code examples around AMP script, server-side JavaScript, GTL, and SQL without needing to have an instance of Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So really the motivation to create this app was every time I needed to share a code example, maybe with a coworker or a client, I had to go into the account, follow all these steps to try to kind of like test my code and then point the person to the location of the assets that I created. So I wanted to do something like similar to JS Fido, that allows you to create these temporary snippets and share with people. So I came with the idea of creating MC snippets. And I will say the second motivation that I had for creating the app was the fact that there's not a free demo environment for Salesforce Marketing Cloud for people to practice. So I wanted to give that to the community. So if you want to try MC Snippets, it's 100% free, and you can go to mcsnippets.herokuapp.com. Thank you.
The next one we've got is from Jonathan Van Druisen from DE Select. He's going to share about motivation, not just for a couple of their apps that they've built out.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Van Druisen. I'm the co-founder and CTO at DE Select. And I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for about a decade, originally working on the Force.com platform. And about 4 years ago, my co-founder, Anthony, reached out to me while he was doing consulting at a major company doing Salesforce Marketing Cloud consulting. And he reached out saying, hey, I noticed this pain point that customers have related to segmentation in Marketing Cloud. Marketers have to write SQL queries, which is typically not a strength that they have. And he had an idea for a drag and drop segmentation solution. So I started working on the first version together with Anthony. And then we got a few interns involved. And now about 4 years later, we have this product called DE Select Segment. It's available on the App Exchange. We have about 80 customers now, including names like Dell, Bloomberg, or Cornell University. And the company grew to about 40 people. So a lot has changed in those last 4 years since we were just sitting together, the two of us at a desk. And we even released 2 other products. So we also have DE Select Engage, which is a saturation control solution. So it makes it easy to manage how many communications you're sending to each contact. And basically, we started working on this because Eduardo, our head of customer success, he was doing consulting at Deloitte. And he noticed how multiple customers were asking Deloitte to always build the same similar solution, which is to manage saturation control. So that's the motivation for starting our DE Select Engage product. That's been live for about 2 months now, and it's also going great. And lastly, we have another product that we created. You see here this search bar here on top. This is a Chrome extension. It's available for free. We created this because we noticed how painful it was in Salesforce Marketing Cloud to search for data extensions, for example. And because you basically already have to know in which folder something is before you can start searching, and that kind of defeats the purpose of searching. So anyway, those are my motivations. Thank you.
I think it's wonderful to see those, and I think the big takeaway for those two, and some of that isn't quite a Salesforce Marketing Cloud app, but the guys are scratching an itch. There's something that they're seeing a need for, and they're saying, okay, let's solve this, and let's solve it so we can share it with the community. And I think that's the big takeaway. Mansoor, would you like to share your screen and kick off with your the app that you're launching at the moment? We can't hear you right now yet.
Hi, sorry, this unmute button is always. Well, my name is Munir, so I'm the founder of Cesium and Marketing Champion, and I also have a personal blog called The Smart SFMC Marketer. When we launched Cesium a few years ago, it was a consulting partner of Salesforce, so focusing on Marketing Cloud. And when COVID hit, we started implementing some use cases as apps. So we created a couple of apps, and basically what we did was just turning into apps recurring asks. When 2-3 customers would ask us for a feature, we would consider we would put it in the backlog. So that's what we did. And what I consider that Salesforce Marketing Cloud as a tool will thrive if the ecosystem thrives. And I think we don't build enough apps. And also I think that we wait too long for Salesforce to release some features. So the last app we're releasing now is called TikTok Ads. Basically, you have Marketing Cloud advertising in Salesforce Marketing Cloud. I mean X Advertising Studio, which supports the whole Meta galaxy with Facebook, Instagram, and so you have Google Ads, Snapchat, Twitter, LinkedIn, and we created the same app with with some optimization with with TikTok. So what we do is that you can create audiences in TikTok for business. So custom audiences, matching your data extension, and you can also use TikTok as a channel in Salesforce Marketing Cloud in Journey Builder. So I can show you here. I'm just gonna show my screen. Um, on the screen like this, so you can see. So do you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, great. So
So
that's the
Yep. So just going
yeah
to ask,
you
this app works in line with Journey Builder, and it becomes an option. Is that correct? Or
yeah exact. So
yep.
you have a screen here where you can manage and create audiences. You have a screen to connect your ad accounts, so you can have different ad accounts. And also, when you created your audiences, you can either use them in Journey Builder. We created a custom activity here, uh, which is simpler in a way than those of Advertising Studio. So you can add or remove from an existing audience.
That's awesome.
And
How do people find the app? Is it up on anywhere yet, or is it ready to? Is it live?
so, sorry.
How do people find the app? Where do people go to?
Oh, the app will be live on the App Exchange some way between this week and next week, but before connections.
It, it,
We have
it,
yeah
in Q&A, it'd be great to sort of drill into the process of what it's taken to get it published.
yeah yeah
We've got a lot on, so what I might do, we might just keep going through and then come back in Q&A. I think also I'd
great.
love to do a session where we just break into your app and talk through some of the challenges that we've had. You may have had putting it together and just that process if
Of course.
if we're
Yeah.
able to do. Yeah. Cameron, what are you going to surprise us with today? You're on mute, mate. Yeah, gotcha.
There we go.
Yeah.
No surprises today, sorry. There will be some surprises coming up soon, though. No spoilers just yet, but had some great success last night on a revision of the extension I've been working on. So soon. No surprises yet, though. But I would like to share with the group a bit of a motivation of what drove me down this path, like the others on this call today, to build an app to enhance the features that there are in Marketing Cloud to scratch an itch or to solve a niche, as I think the others have said so far. So for me, it was actually improvement of workflow. I'm a Marketing Cloud architect, so what I do all day long is I explore through people's Marketing Cloud accounts to try and solve their problems, to fix issues, to make new developments. And exploring Marketing Cloud in the UI is good, and it's also sometimes not so good. So for me, it was a big workflow thing. I do a lot of health checks, a lot of making sure that customers' instances are working as they should do, going back through and reverse engineering what they had built, what's going wrong, redocumenting it. Often there's no documentation to start with. And so for me, it was actually to solve that. There are parts of my job that I love, and there are parts that are really, really boring. And I thought, we are literally using one of the world leading marketing automation tools. Why don't I put some automation in the automation tool and make my job easier? And because Marketing Cloud's built on APIs, sure enough, there's heaps of APIs to use. So I thought I'd use some of them. And so the SFMC companion Chrome extension does exactly that. It just makes my job easier. It does all the hard exploring for me, the parts I don't enjoy, especially doing things like Automation Studio, trying to figure out what all the SQL activities are doing, where they're targeting, what's next, the imports, all those sort of things that just take so long. I cannot think how many hours I've spent in my life going through automations and documenting down the object IDs and the name, and then in Notepad and in Word or on Google Slides trying to map things out, the hours I've spent doing that. So for me, it was a workflow thing to start with. It was my problem that I knew I had. But then as I started to socialize the idea, everyone else was like, yeah, my problem too. I know what you mean. I've spent hours doing this. And so it became my second motivation. I'd solved my itch, my problem. And then it was, well, hang on, if my problem is actually solving 80% of someone else's problem, maybe there's a bigger problem here that I can be solving. And so it's actually time. I've had a crazy shift in my perspective of time. I've got 2 young kids now. So my value of time has changed. I used to be a double income, no kids household, and now I've got 2 kids. And so I don't have much free time anymore. So I put a much higher value on what time I do have. And so I don't want to be spending my time doing tasks that are boring, tasks that are frustrating, tasks that are just monotonous. So I thought, well, hang on, how about I just make this a whole lot easier for myself? But also there's probably other people who've also got similar time constraints that also don't want to spend their entire day doing boring things. So maybe I can socialize this, I can put it out into the world, and others can save time too. And I think that became a big driver for me then, because I realized that while I'm spending, I think I've spent about 100 and something hours so far developing this Chrome extension, there's now, I think it's over 1,300 or 1,400 users of the Chrome extension so far. And if they're all spending an hour a day on the Chrome extension, saving them time, then every day I'm saving hundreds of hours globally of time that people can then go and spend time with their family, with their kids, like I can now do. So for me, it became a real shift where it's no longer just me solving my problem at a single multiplier of my own time, but it became a force multiplier. I can actually save the time of hundreds or thousands of people around the world to get on with their life and enjoy their job more too. So it really turned into a big shift for me. And that's actually what keeps me going. That's what I'm not going to spoil today, Matt, but I will release some spoilers soon about a new revision I've got coming out shortly, which will solve even more problems.
Thank you, Cameron. I think there's been a couple of comments in the comments there about where to find the app, which is absolutely brilliant. We will share afterwards all the links that have been shared. We'll try and get them all together and share them in the email. Cameron, I think just what resonated, a couple of things that resonated with me there then, you came up with an idea, but then you put a UI around it and shared the UI, and that made it easy for people to understand it. So it's not just, it's content, but it's content with a UI, and that's, I guess, what an app is a little bit. And there's also something I absolutely love is open source sharing. I've been involved in the community, giving back, and I think you're sharing that as well. But it's just like what we're doing here. We're just giving back to the community. So if you join, thank you everyone for sharing those. There is one missing when we're trying to get the onto Salesforce for Query Studio. Unfortunately, we can't get anyone to represent Query Studio. But, you know, there we go again. Another app that scratches a big itch that everyone's got. How do we do queries, get some feedback, and not have to build out queries and data extensions and just do stuff a little bit quicker? So that was just another itch that obviously somebody had. That was put together by Salesforce Labs, and I think the team that put that together has moved on. But they put together something amazing there too. So just got to mention that one. There is a QR code. I'll just share that screen before we kick off, Jason. Just let me share the QR code. Share screen. Please, if you've come in late, scan this QR code in. We've got a survey that we're running. The survey is just asking 3 questions, and we'll share those at the end in the wrap up about apps. What's your favorite app? What's your idea for an app? Are you building an app? Scan that QR code in. I'll also put a link to that in the chat. Jason, take it away. Ken Elliott.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Perfect. So let me share my screen. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jason Hanshaw. I run the marketing technology department at FCB Health and co-author with the great Greg Gifford of Automating Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And here we're going to get a little in the weeds, go through a sample application and kind of look at the setup for a really, basic use case for getting a Salesforce Marketing Cloud app created and instantiated in the system to perform some functionality on the behalf of a given user. So to set the table, we'll start with some key considerations. So for this example, it's using Heroku for hosting and managing, the environment of the application. So we'll cover some basics there, but it won't go too in depth into any of this. But some of the other considerations are a basic knowledge of Express.js. So for those unfamiliar, Express.js is a web application framework for Node.js. It simplifies the process of building these applications. So lots of utilities for routes, middleware, HTTP requests. It really just makes life easier. And I think you'll see a lot of the boilerplate templates for building things like custom journey builder activities and other applications in the system utilize some flavor of this. Then a basic understanding of sessions, routes, and APIs. So a route in Express.js is just a different URL endpoint that explains how the server, is just going to respond to a call there. So each route is associated with a method, a get, a post, and has some handler function that's going to process the request, generate a response. It's really easy to manage because you can navigate different parts of the application to specific URLs. In this instance, it'll be a login, a logout, callback URL, things of that nature. Sessions are a really important concept in web development that allows the server to maintain stateful interactions with clients. So in this application, sessions are managed using Express session middleware. So they allow us to store and access user-specific data, which is really important in this use case for managing the authorization code and authenticating in to Salesforce to be able to execute the application. And then APIs, anyone familiar with Salesforce Marketing Cloud API, just a way of programmatically accessing resources on the system in a secure manner. And just a caveat, this is for demonstration purposes only. So the use case is simplistic, won't include testing, anything of that nature, but can be used as a boilerplate to fast track an application development of your own, which you can find the repository right there. The QR code goes to that URL as well. And to get started, it's very simple. Just clone the app and you're ready to go with npm start. So the first thing that we'll need to do is create the installed package. So we want to create a Marketing Cloud app component type, and we want to give that app component type some required properties that are necessary to set up the package. So the first will be obviously the name of the application, description, a short description of the application's purpose, the login endpoint. So this will be the route that will be called by Salesforce during the login process. It's what iframes the app, manages the cookie, OAuth 2.0, which we'll cover in some degree, and I think Elliot will get a little more in depth in his discussion. And then we have the logout endpoint, which ends the user session and will unset the login cookie. So when someone logs out of the Salesforce Marketing Cloud instance, we want to make sure that they're not continuing to be authenticated into the platform and able to access those resources. And in addition to that, we will create an API integration component type. We'll live on the same installed package. It will be a web app integration type. And then the properties for that, we'll have to provide two. So a URI, which will be the authorization redirect. It appends the authorization code to be redirected to the URL after the authorization. And then we give it a scope of email read. So for our example application, we are simply going to use this as an ability to instantiate the app inside of Salesforce Marketing Cloud and call the messaging email definitions API and just output a authenticated request directly to the screen from that. So very basic implementation. But to take a look at your installed package, obviously this has been anonymized for this instance, but it will look something like this, right? We have our Marketing Cloud app, in this instance, example SFMC app, and we have our different URIs in there, and then we have just this simple install package that will work as a web app integration type. So for those unfamiliar with Heroku, it is very easy to get started creating a sample application. You can do it very easily through the UI. So on the main home screen of your Heroku instance, you simply select new and create new app. As you can see through the example preview there, I can give the app some example name that is unique, has to start with a lowercase letter, or I could use the Heroku CLI if I wanted to do it from my command line. You could use Heroku create and generate a unique application defined by the system, or you can provide a custom one yourself to create that application. This application will use config vars, known as environment variables, pretty common set that you'll find in any hosting platform and very easy to incorporate into your application. They're used to configure and customize the behavior of the application running on the Heroku platform. So you can see, looking at some of the config bars of this application, some of these are probably going to be familiar for anyone who's utilized the Salesforce Marketing Cloud API and some of the naming conventions related to that. But we'll have an app secret, a client ID, a client secret, a redirect UI, subdomain. These are just, it's a secure way of storing this data so that they're encrypted at rest in Heroku and they're not accessible client side, and it's not in our deployment configuration. So obviously, when we're pushing code to our GitHub repo or whatever platform we're using for deployments, we obviously don't want to have credentials that could be compromised in any form and be able to inflict harm on our instance. So always good to store these values as environment variables in whatever platform that you're using. So in Heroku, we will use config bars. I'll show where those are located momentarily. Take a look at all of the config bars that we'll be setting in here. First, we have the client ID. It's used for the OAuth 2.0 authentication with Salesforce Marketing Cloud. We have the client secret, which is also used for the same purpose. The subdomain of our Salesforce Marketing Cloud account that we'll use to call the authorize endpoint, and for the REST API for the email definitions. We have the app secret, which is just a secret key used for session management in the application. In our instance, it's going to be a static key that's set as a config bar that is able to more secure the session state. So the session obviously being important for storing the cookie and for authorization to make sure that the person who's authenticated to the account is maintaining that information inside their session. In an actual production application, you would want some kind of key generating service that stores it in the config bar, but for here, we'll set it to just be a static value. And then we have the redirect URI, which is where the user will be redirected after the authentication with Salesforce. And with that, let's dive into the app. So first, we'll take a look at Heroku. So if you're not familiar with Heroku, we'll just show the sample pieces of the platform here so you can get a little more familiar. So this one's pretty straightforward, not a whole lot going on. So with this, you have the capability in the deploy tab. Here you can see I have automated the deployment for this application. So all we need to do is, clone the repo. We create our own Heroku app. We link our Heroku app to the repo that we've got on our own private GitHub instance. And then whenever we push to the master branch there, it's going to automatically deploy our application. It makes things a lot easier. You don't have to worry about coming in here and manually deploying it, though you're able to do that. And then as you can see, there are some additional options through the Heroku CLI, but GitHub is obviously the simplest version. And I think something most people who are developers in the community are more familiar with. So we can disable automatic deploys, but for this instance, I've got it set up configured there. For the config bar piece, if you wanted to configure those variables like you see in the screenshot, it's simply in the settings menu, and you can see here under config bars. And so obviously I don't want to reveal those because they are critical for the application to function, but that is where you would set the application values for the different variables that you're then able to call inside the code that we'll take a look at momentarily. And so another and the last important piece that we'll call out inside of Heroku that I think if you're building an application or testing, you're going to want to heavily be involved there, is to simply go to the More screen and select View Logs. So I've anonymized some of the logs here. Pushing things to the console, this is where it will get logged when you run with Heroku, and is extremely helpful to understand if you get any errors, where the errors might be happening and how your application's functioning. So we can see a sample call of the application here might define a session ID, and then just let me know, we're redirecting to the Salesforce login page because an access token doesn't already exist. We're going to handle the callback from Salesforce, store the access token in session, and obviously these are anonymized. And then maybe you'll get and here's an example of a call that was not authorized. So the person wasn't logged in, or the session had expired. We get a 401 error. Unauthorized means that they weren't able to access the application. So logs are very helpful. It's critical that when you're testing and deploying and running through everything, it's a piece that you want to pay attention to. So with that being said, let's dive into the application itself. So this application is meant to be as streamlined as possible, since the use case is quite simple. So we can just do a quick overview just to understand the file structure. So we have our main application directory here, node modules. This is just going to contain all the libraries that we have set inside of our package.nh JSON file, and you can install any of those using npm install if you have Node.js installed, which you will need to execute this application. It will automatically create those modules packages, and that's where they'll live. So that's generated automatically. We have our routes directory, and so you can see we have the different endpoints that Salesforce is going to call and our application is going to utilize. So we're going to have an index, which will just be the root directory for our application, where that's what we're actually going to show the rendered HTML and API content from the request that we're going to make to Marketing Cloud. We have our login, which is what Salesforce is going to call to authenticate our application. We have our callback, which the login is going to call to handle the response back from Salesforce when we post to that authorized endpoint, which we'll take a look at. And then we have a logout endpoint, which will simply clear the session, delete any access tokens that are stored in the session so that the user is no longer authenticated to access the application. Views folder is just going to be a very simple HTML file that's going to display the actual front end of the application and show the request that we will get. App.js will be the routing, pretty much the main file of our application that tells us what to run and how to handle everything. And then we have package.json that will handle the dependencies and the different versions and naming conventions. So first, we'll just start with package.json. If anyone's not familiar, it just provides some metadata and information about your application that is utilized to help build it. So the most important pieces here are the scripts to start. So this start script will tell Heroku when we deploy the application what command to execute to actually start the application. So it will start it with node app.js, which just fires off the app.js file and will kick off the application logic. The test section here is, if you see it as boilerplate, mainly meant as a caveat to include tests when you're running locally or into production, but obviously that's outside the scope of this demonstration. So we just have the standard boilerplate sample. And then the other piece to note from here is just the dependencies. So we're defining the different libraries that we want to use from npm and the versions that we want to use. So we'll use these versions or greater. And then when we define them in the package.json file, right, and then we run npm install, it's going to pick up these dependencies, run them to the node modules, and then we're able to access them within our application. So let's take a look at the primary file, which is the app.js file. And I've tried to comment this as much as I can. So you can see at the top, we're going to take some of those node modules, the most important being Express, but cookie parser and Express session also in there that are npm packages that will help us facilitate some of the routing of this application. So we want to require Express, obviously, because it's an Express application, and we want the routing and request management from that system. Cookie parser is a great library that will allow us to more easily manage the access token that will be stored at the cookie level for the session. So middleware for parsing those cookies. Express session is a middleware for managing the session data that allows us to access that a little more easily. And then we create our application. So we assign this variable called app, and it will be an Express application. And then we give it a port. So we'll run it local at 3000 if you want to run this locally. This application, if you download the repo, is not set to run locally. It's set to run simply when you deploy an example application. So we can use the process.env.port. So process.env just says that there's an environment variable defined by the system. And in this case, Heroku assigns a variable called port automatically. We're able to pick up that and say that that's the port that we want to serve this application on. And you can see similarly for sessions, if we want to access any of those config bars within the system, we'll use this syntax to do it. Process.env.appSecret. So this is going to be that secret for the session encryption that we were talking about. You wanted it to be dynamic, and you'll probably need a session handler for that. But for here, it's a static value. And so we'll instantiate cookie parser, and then we'll instantiate our actual session piece, which is going to contain that access token. Is really the key piece of the authorization process that we're going to be utilizing for this. So we'll set the secret, we'll prevent resaving. You're allowed to save uninitialized session to store. A lot of these, Heroku, for if you're behind a proxy, will enable support for that, provide a name, and then only serve that cookie over HTTPS and some other settings that will relate to the session. So we're able to access that value as needed. And then next we have route handler. So obviously we want to provide the mapping for the route when someone calls or when Salesforce calls the login route or the callback or the logout, or we have a request for the root of the application. Obviously, we want to route the application and process the logic at that instance. And so we will define these variables here and require those routes, which you can see it's calling the routes files here to be able to pull those in. And then here we'll assign them to the actual respective URLs that they'll be assigned to. So we'll mount the index to the index route and so forth, login, callback, and log out. And then the application will start the server and start listening on the port that is defined by Heroku, and it will prompt that in the console logs that you'll see in Heroku that the application has started and is listening for events at that port. So now that we have a general idea, we have this app.js file that's just starting the session for us. It's getting everything mounted, so we have all these different endpoints that we can access. That we can take a look at the actual routes that we'll be calling. So the first one we'll take a look at is the index.js. So this is our primary route for the application. The root, think that it's the base of your application here. So we'll set some of the modules that we need for this one, like Express. We'll use Axios to make some HTTP requests a little easier to handle. We'll want to use FS for reading files from the file system. So we want to modify that index.html file and sort of change the content there so that we're outputting the results of that API call, and then working with file paths for the same reason for that. And then of course we grab the subdomain. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say for the router of this Express application, someone makes a request to the index route, like, okay, we're going to take that and asynchronously process the remainder. So we're going to say let the console know we're accessing this root route. There's a unique session ID that was instantiated in our app.js file. And let's try to grab an access token from that session ID. We want one set from the session. We run a check after that. Is there an access token to generate from the session? So can we pull one from the cookie? Turns out there's not one. All right. If there's not one, we're going to redirect that user to the login route, which we're going to cover in the next piece. So there's no access token. You're not authenticated. Let's push you back to login, which will generate the Salesforce Marketing Cloud login screen, force you to log in to access the application. That's not the case, right? We have an access token that we can use. Let's go ahead and make that API request to the messaging email definitions piece. So we want to get that information that we want to return to our application, and we'll perform probably what I think most people here will be familiar with, just a standard get request to Salesforce Marketing Cloud API using that access token that has been stored inside of the session. And then finally, we'll get our index file that we're going to display to the end user here. If we have an issue reading the file, obviously we'll output an error. If we get a 500 error, we'll send that to the front end and we'll display some text to let the user know, we tried to process it, we got the access token, but there was an error reading the file. If we don't have an issue with that, we will add the response to that file. So we can go take a look at the index.html. It's very basic. You can see we just have a header here, and then we have this section for the response. And so we're just going to target this piece from the response and replace it with a stringified response data. So whatever Marketing Cloud gives us from that authorized call that we've made to the email definitions resource path, we'll go ahead and pull that down, and then we'll send that updated HTML to the client and then display it to the screen. And so the user will see that information presented to them. If there's any issues during that whole processing piece, we're going to go ahead and catch that error, fail to call the SFMC API. We might get that 401 error because it's unauthorized. The access token could be expired. Lots of different reasons that could lead to a failure related to that. And we'll show that error, and then we'll send a 500 to the screen so that the user sees that there's some text that there was a 500 response with an error message. Things didn't process as intended. And then we'll just export the router, which allows us to access it in the app.js file and call it to be able to process that information on the route. So high level, I know that was really in depth, but basically maybe it's helpful to take a look at the flow here. So this is basically what our application is doing, right? We're the client application, and someone hits our route, and we're going to make a request to the Marketing Cloud authorization endpoint, and we're going to pass it a redirect UI and a client ID, and we'll look at that in the next route. And it's going to respond back with some information related to us to allow us to log in if we're not authorized, or to, the session's good to go and we don't even need to make the request. So in the event that we log in, Marketing Cloud is going to return that user and return an authorization code to our callback route, which we'll focus on next. And that callback route will set the session ID, set the access token, which is then, when you access the index route again, it's going to, grab that, say, hey, I'm authorized. Let me go ahead and make that call and present this API information from the email definitions to the user. So that's really the whole flow here. User logging in, we're getting the authorization code, we request an access token, it gives us the access token, and then finally here we're able to call the API. So this entire flow and what we're describing right now is the authorization that allows us to make that authorization on behalf of the end user without having to do that so manually or make it so global. It's user specific for the user that's logged into Marketing Cloud. So for this, obviously, we go to the login route. Let's say we get in there, there's no access token, right? So it will execute this login route and call this. We'll grab some of the relevant information that we need to start authorizing the process from Marketing Cloud. So we have our client ID, redirect UI, subdomain, those config vars that we set in Heroku. And we'll just tell the console, hey, they got to the index router, they accessed the login route automatically. We're going to go ahead and configure an authorization URL so that we can pass that authorization to Marketing Cloud and get a callback so we can grab that access token. So here we're using the V2 authorize endpoint, which you can find here. It's a reference. So we're just going to call this endpoint, and there's the URL structure. You'll see it's very similar to what we're using now. You need an encoded redirect URI when you're doing it. So you can see we're encoding that component here. So basically we're passing it the subdomain for our individual instance. We're setting the response type to code. It's the authorization code. We're setting our client ID and our redirect URI. Our redirect URI being the callback route for our application, which will be called now, and we'll redirect the user to this URL, right? And so when it goes to that URL, it will call this application when Salesforce has taken our request. And this is the callback that handles the response from Salesforce. And so you can see we'll log it to the console and say we're going to handle that callback. We'll get the code from the authorization. We'll create a request body with a client ID, the client secret. We'll redirect URI back to the callback route. And then the code being the authorization code that we've received from Salesforce. And we will make another call with that code to grab the access token here. So we will call the standard V2 token endpoint. We'll stringify the request payloads, very similar to every other payload you've seen for authorization from V2 token. And then we will set an access token variable in our session and say, so we can persist it across different sessions. I obviously don't want to be logged out or reauthorized every single time I refresh my browser. We'll store it at that session level. And as long as it's in the session, we'll be able to access it, which is what we were doing in that index route. We wanted to make sure that we were able to access that value. So here's where it's getting set. And then we'll tell the console to go ahead and just output that access token to the session, show me that things worked as intended in the console. And then we will redirect the user back to the index route, right? And now it's got the access token it needs. So the access token is set in the session. We go to the index route. The index route says, hey, do you have an access token in the session? We do. Now we can make that authenticated call. And if we have any errors, similar to the other ones, we will send a 500 response back to the user so that they can see that there was a failure to exchange the code for an access token. And then for our logout endpoint, we log out of Salesforce Marketing Cloud. It will call this application route. And so basically all this is going to do is just destroy your session. So that access token that's being stored in your session, if you quit your cache or cookies or anything of that nature, obviously you're going to do something similar. But here we're just going to wreck the session. You're not going to be able to authenticate without being redirected back to that login route. So we're going to query everything and make sure that you're no longer authenticated into the platform. So that is the overall route and function of this application. App.js is going to be our main component that's going to allow us to kind of manage all the routing. And then, the index.js is going to handle whether we want to go to login or we need to redirect someone through the callback to get that V2 token and to make those calls to authenticate the API call to Marketing Cloud. And so the final product should be an application in Salesforce that looks like this. Obviously, when we created our Marketing Cloud app, it automatically made it available through here. And now we've got an authenticated request, which returns a request ID. And there are no definitions in this account, but we're able to make an authenticated request on the user's behalf inside of Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Now, if we tried to access this route through an incognito window, there's no session assigned to that access token, so we know it doesn't exist. right? It should go straight to the Salesforce Marketing Cloud login. And if I were to go to the console, I'll see that that route has been called because this person is no longer, authorized because they don't have the access token stored at the session level. So that is a high level, somewhat in-depth implementation of using Express.js. You can copy the code that was listed in the repo, and you should be able to execute it, and you'll get this similar instance based off of the different values that you set in the config bar specific for your instance. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Jason, for demystifying that. Actually, it all makes perfect sense. It looks very straightforward and easy. Elliot, you were going to dive into some OAuth considerations. We can't hear you yet, Elliot.
Yeah, so I just want to expand on what Jason has already covered, actually, and kind of stole my thunder, which of course is fine. Just so that you're aware of different three-legged OAuth flows. So Jason walked us through. We have effectively what's called a three-legged OAuth flow. We can get an authorization code and exchange effort. But also, I just want to make you aware of other authentication options that are available when building apps for Marketing Cloud. So let me go and share my screen. And I'm probably just going to go and share. I'll share two things. Firstly, I'm going to share this one here. So it's like a cooking show. Here's one I created earlier. So this is an install package. An install package needs at least one component in order to do something. So let's go and add a component. So here's the Marketing Cloud app. Click next, and obviously Jason showed us configuring the login endpoint and logout endpoint. But also under API integration, any of you have previously done any API integration with Marketing Cloud, most likely you've used this server-to-server client credentials flow where you get exchange a client ID and client secret for an access token, and then you can access the platform in the context of the system. What I want to briefly talk about is public app and web app. So public app is actually, firstly, it's actually a very similar, almost identical to the flow that Jason's been describing, where I'll go and click here, where we go and define the callback URL, so the redirect URIs. That is, once that they have successfully authenticated, logged in, then they're going to go back to this URL. And your attention to is this option for offline access. And so, as I think the tooltip helpfully explains, that it enables users to go and access the Marketing Cloud API in the context of the logged in user or previously logged in user after they've actually logged out. And you've probably already you interacted with these type of things before, where you saying connect to GitHub, or there'll be some button to go and maybe even log in with Google. I mean, that's a kind of three-legged OAuth flow. And so, but what it enables you to do is to, and I was just trying to look for an example earlier. Imagine that you have a, maybe it's a platform, say for example, like inbox monitoring, and you want to go and connect to Marketing Cloud. You can have a button saying connect to Marketing Cloud. And then if they're not logged into Marketing Cloud, then it will initialize that three-legged OAuth flow and prompt them to log in. And then you can retain the access token. And then if offline access is enabled, and then they won't have to log in again for the duration of the refresh token. So maybe you want to set this up 60 days is the highest that you can go. There you go. That's quite sensible. So that they won't be forced to log back in for 60 days, and they have to obviously then go and complete this click on that button again to connect to Marketing Cloud. The only kind of caveat, obviously, if they're disconnected as a user, then they will. If their user account is disabled, they won't be able to log in. The only other thing, or two other things I just wanted to touch on. So firstly, back, if we have a look at web app, this is almost identical to a public app, but it enables, it's really designed for building mobile-based apps where you can't maintain the confidentiality of a client secret. Yeah, it's similar, but without a client secret. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is there's a get user info route, which somewhat unusually, it's the only API route that's enabled, that's available on the authorization endpoint. And as its name implies, it returns all the user information about the person who's currently logged in. Maybe it's through that Marketing Cloud app or through your public app here. So, go and give you the user ID, and you can get their email address. And so this is kind of good to have. Maybe you want to go and send them an email or something. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about today.
Thanks, Elliot. I love it when you say this is something I cooked up earlier. It just makes me think you have Journey Builder for breakfast. But it's just me. Sorry. Okay, we've got to the Q&A part of this, and we're running a few minutes behind. So just a couple of biggies. It feels like we'll do a couple of sessions as a result of this. I'm going to pronounce your name wrong again, I think. Munya?
Yeah, Munir.
Munya, I'm not pronouncing it wrong. I'm just thinking I'm pronouncing it wrong. Are you up for a session where we go through your app and the build process, not from a technical point of view, but more from a challenger's point of view, about any of the hurdles that you might have needed to jump across? Is that something that interests you?
Yeah, of course. You want me to talk about it in 1 minute? I mean, the main problem.
Yeah,
okay.
Not now, but maybe we'll have a chat offline and come back.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it'd be. I know I've talked to a lot of people about their experiences and challenges with building apps, and I think it'd be very revealing to talk. Okay, this is how we test it. We pen test it. We do these different types of things. So we've sort of talked about the technical stuff, but there's another aspect to it that I think we need to talk about how to go to production. And I think there could be something revealing there that we could talk about. So let's have a chat about that and sort of work out how that might work. Put in the chat there, feels like we could do an additional workshop for those interested to deep dive into questions. Give a like if you'd like to do that. There's been a number of likes, there's 9 likes on that, so we'll definitely do another workshop on this for questions. We can't honour questions enough now because we just don't have enough time to go through them. Jason's mentioned that he'll be doing a blog shortly. So keep an eye out for that. We'll make sure that we feature that on our weekly newsletter as well to go through this. Yes, this is being recorded, and we'll get this recording up just as soon as we can. I'm just going through some more questions we've got here. There was an example. Cameron shared the example for the app, the GitHub repo for this. What I really appreciated, Jason, and everyone about what we've gone through today is just how simple it is. It's simple. It's simple if you know how to do it, and you've certainly shared the process for how to get this done. Just reading up. Congratulations, Cameron. 1,571 users as of today. Well done. Scratchy.
I have a question. Yeah. I have a question for Cameron and or Munir. So I just want to kind of understand what is their cost or fees associated with getting an app on App Exchange? And I asked the question is that recently put a content block, a custom content block on App Exchange, and that cost $1,500. I think they have a third-party company to do code reviews. And so is it generally now that you have to pay flat fee, or
Yeah.
are they
Now it's a flat fee. It's a flat fee of
right? Okay,
$999, and
right.
it's a one shot, and it depends. You can create an app with 4 extensions, and the 5 apps would be paid once. So
Right.
they really lowered the price, and you don't have the recurring $150 for every year anymore.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
So that's the good moment to launch.
Cameron, yeah, your mic's off.
Yeah. No.
How about now?
There we go. Yeah, that's it.
My funny headset. Sorry about that. I feel like I dodged a bullet there because I did mine on the Chrome store. Mine's a Chrome extension, so $0. Although, Elliot, to answer your question, and for those who are interested in doing some dev in that space, similar process as Manuel just mentioned. There is actually a code review step. You do have to set up your store, you set up your app, you set up your user, you declare certain things, what your app does and does not do. You submit it for code review. In my case, it was Google, then does the code review to make sure there's nothing cheeky going on. And once approved, they then allow it to be published. And then you get the final big missile button to press publish. And I think, Matt, that'd be a great demonstration from Jason and the rest of the team when it comes to actually deploying, and actually Manuel too, yourself, of course, when it comes to deploying an app. For me, it felt like when you send an email for the first time, you got sweaty hands and you're hovering over the mouse ready to press the go live button, hoping it all goes right. So I'd love to see a better workflow, because that was my first time releasing an app as well. So
It sounds like we've got another session coming out of here. Is there a repo, Cameron, for Chrome apps? Is there something that's shared generally that we can all have?
Chrome does give you the Get Started base plate. And I literally use that. I'm not a developer. I did hotel management as a degree in university, so this is not my background. But JavaScript's a beautiful enough language. I do say beautiful. It's a good language that I was able to reverse engineer and figure out how to make it work. And because it's Google, things documented, it's the internet, it's JavaScript. So you can find the answers you need pretty easily. And ChatGPT, don't forget, if you're a developer and you've got a problem that you're trying to articulate, open up ChatGPT and just ask. Just ask it, I'm trying to do this in JavaScript. You're a developer. How would you solve it, ChatGPT? And it gave me back some really cool functions. So use that as a developer sitting next to you to ask it questions and have it give you responses. It won't give you the perfect answer every time, but it may give you just that little breadcrumb you need to then go and Google the next keyword. As we all know how to Google things, right? If you have the right keyword, you find the right answers. ChatGPT, use it as a keyword helper. Let it help you find those breadcrumbs.
Awesome. I think we've covered off as much as we're going to do. The last couple of comments and a few comments in between everything else is thank you so much to everyone that's presented. Love your work, Jason, as one that's here. Amazing job, well done. No, there's just awesome. There's lots of positive feedback. I think everyone's put a lot of effort into getting this to happen, so thank you very much. We'll definitely get some more events started up around this. The Marketing Cloud Dev Group, look out for, we've got a connections wrap up with Elliot, which is coming soon. We're pretty much meeting weekly at the moment. We've got transferable skills just about every week. And yeah, every month we've got a main event, just like today, where we share something really topical and important that everyone wants to sort of dig into. Thank you for joining, and see you on the internet. And please, when we send out the weekly newsletter, reply and let us know what you want more of.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
See you next time.
Thank you.